This week's episode is brought to you by Black Obsidian, Thimble, William Masters, and Shannon Wydell. Thank you, Black Obsidian, Thimble, William Masters, and Shannon Wydell. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps the authors of The Whole Rabbit submerged in a pool of amniotic fluid pumped with surgical-grade anesthetic and wrote this very episode using telepathy, a word processor, and a USB cord you can't find at the gas station. If you'd like to help us keep our bodies suspended in a state of transtemporal mimetic hypersuggestion, or just hear the second half of this episode, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your $5 will not only get you the second half of this episode, but our entire library of extended episodes full of strange and esoteric content to listen to. Not only that, I'll send you an enchanted sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art and instant access to our Discord server where fans and creators of the show share pictures of their pets and the strange things they like to dress them in. To mark the special occasion of The Whole Rabbit turning 4, we decided to celebrate by uncovering occult symbolism in a place you might never expect it. In this case, one of the most successful films ever released, Pixar's 2003 classic, Finding Nemo. While we explore some of the popular fan theories you may be familiar with, we go deeper than the surface to discover a treasure trove of occult symbolism that not only relates to alchemy, the tarot, Jungian archetypes, and the philosophy of Aleister Crowley, but manages to do so in a way that reinforces the wholesome message of the film. In the extended show, we dive even deeper, exploring what Egyptian mythology, Gnosticism, the Qabbalistic tree of life, and the Greek magical Papyri have to do with Finding Nemo. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Wake up, fishy.
When I went to go rent this movie on Amazon, it shows the dentist, and he's holding the bag with Nemo in it, and behind him is the alligator, which that can only mean one thing, that this movie's about the tarot.
Man, when I went to rent it on Amazon, it just showed Nemo.
I'm a piranha from the Amazon.
Hello everybody, and newcomers of Orange and White. Welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just ruin your childhood by exploring the protandrous hermaphroditic mating behaviors of clownfish. Nay, we excitedly explicate upon the explicit use of esoteric symbolism woven tastefully throughout the best-selling DVD of all time, which cleverly and surprisingly supports the wholesome narrative of the film despite being, perhaps intentionally, riddled with the philosophy sacred to Aleister Crowley, because this week we're discussing the alchemical secrets of Finding Nemo. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, also known as Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by my co-hosts, the motherly muncher of marlins, Mari Sama.
Fish are delish.
The melodious man of marlin spikes, Malachor 5.
What's good?
And the sumptuous sailor of the seas of symbolism, Heka Astra.
Hello. I's to buy the bales the boat, and I's to buy the sails it, and I's to buy the catches the fish and brings them home to Liza.
What's this demon language you're speaking?
It's Newfie. It's from the other part of Canada, way over on the other side, west coast. You called me a sailor.
Now, I think some people will think looking for occult philosophy in a children's cartoon is straight up wacky, but I don't think it's as crazy as it first seems. So let's begin by asking, why look for hidden content in cartoons?
When I was a kid watching kids' movies with my family, I remember laughing at some of the jokes in the movies, and sometimes my mom or dad would respond by asking me why I laughed at the joke. And at the time, I guess I didn't really understand some of the jokes that I did laugh at because the jokes were adult humor that were inserted into the kids' movies. But now as an adult, I've rewatched some of those movies. So now I understand why I didn't actually get those jokes as a kid. And also why my parents would ask why I laughed at them. So they do put stuff into movies.
Mainly to make it, entertaining for both kids and adults. I mean, that's really why Pixar was so famous. When the adults are entertained as much as the children, it makes it that much more successful and a classic.
But what if it's not just jokes? What if it's also
symbolism and knowledge?
Yeah, I totally agree. Cartoons or animation films like Finding Nemo, they're definitely targeted towards the youth, but it's often riddled with mature themes. Digital animation is an experience. When I was a kid, this movie came out, I was in 5th grade or so, and the visuals were honestly spectacular. So I feel like part of the way that it's getting into the youth's subconscious is by just making it look dazzling and look at this beautiful display of technological graphic advancement.
ooh, shiny.
Exactly. I would say the opposite opposite of this work is like stop motion or really dope Japanese animation like Akira or, any of those really mature themed animes. Those aren't targeted towards kids, but they're still cartoons. Nemo is targeted towards kids and it's like a 3D animation. So it's kind of like a little bit of an opposite attitude in the creative process, I feel.
Yeah, so while you would expect there to be esoteric symbolism in perhaps Evangelion or Akira, you might not expect it to be in Finding Nemo.
It was groundbreaking. Their decision to use the ocean, it just really let them flex. Like, look at all this cool, ray tracing we're going to do and all these pretty colors. Yeah, I remember when ray tracing stuff was still kind of early and you would get like old Macintosh computers to render like these trippy 90s aesthetic, like circles over clouds. And that was the ray tracing I remember at the start. And it would take like 10 minutes to render some of these more complex images. But a studio like Pixar were way ahead of the game in like implementing that tech into an animated short film and eventually full-length movies.
Yeah, they were pioneers. And honestly, you're right about them basically using the movies as a flex, because everything they produced in the early days, it was as the technology advanced to render more things more realistically, each movie would have a textural motif or theme that has to do with the certain technology. Like for Nemo, it was water, physics, and then the ray tracing for like liquids. And then before that, there was Monsters Incorporated, and that's when the hair physics came out, like the fuzz. The main character, Sully, is all fuzzy a bear. So each film that they have comes out with, they're focusing on what's new in the game of 3D rendering. And they had render farms bigger than any other studio. Like they had an entire warehouse of computers set up just rendering single frames for each. It was crazy how much power they had.
And I think we'll discover this as we go, that the symbolism we found seems to be a flex. It's like, look how we can do this. We can tell stories in this way. And I think we really underestimate storytellers in general because we just don't understand their craft. They look at old mythology, they look at religion, and they think, how can I weave this into my story?
Yeah, and then they implement, the Easter egg technique, and all the Pixar films have like interesting things going on in the background that you're really not going to notice on first watch. For example, like in Toy Story 3, Andy's room, there's shelves on the wall, and it's the molecule structure of LSD, and that's just on the wall, and it's clear as day. So that just makes me think like, okay, like I haven't gone back into Pixar world and looked at it from the occult perspective, and this movie's full of it.
So as anyone with kids or a penchant for watching cartoons will know, it's a long-held tradition to subtly insert grown-up jokes. The idea is simple. If you need grown-ups to watch your cartoon and pay for them at the request of their kids, the least you could do is throw in some laughs for them too. During the baby boom, World War II veterans watched Looney Tunes with their kids and found copious use of sound effects, jokes, or references to the war. On the flip side, adult films known to use coded symbolism, like in the case of Stanley Kubrick's body of work, cartoons like Tony the Tiger, Bugs Bunny, Dopey of the Seven Dwarfs, Tom and Jerry, and Winnie the Pooh make appearances and add context to many scenes. In the case of Pixar, their cartoons answer Kubrick back with winks and nods in at least 2 cases that relate to our story today. Pixar's Toy Story, the first feature-length computer animated film, features a floor pattern in Sid's house, which is used in Kubrick's The Shining during a scene where Danny is playing with his toys prior to being physically abused, presumably by his father. By the time Finding Nemo arrived in 2007, Pixar had not forgotten Kubrick's The Shining, and, of course, Danny's murderous alcoholic father Jack when Bruce the shark snarls, "Here's Brucey!" in homicidal pursuit of Marlin and Dory after falling off the wagon. These are known as Easter eggs. In the case of Pixar, so many Easter eggs appear throughout their various films that the ones referencing each other have long been theorized by fans to indicate that all of the Pixar animated films occur on the same timeline, making them part of one giant story. When we take this all into consideration, it's not only plausible Finding Nemo indulges in hidden symbolism, it's pretty much guaranteed. So, what is Finding Nemo really about? If we consider that Finding Nemo is the best-selling DVD of all time, we should hope there's some compelling reason to rewatch it. As we shall discuss, Finding Nemo isn't just a story about a kidnapped clownfish, but one about finding psychological and even spiritual peace, using symbolism from the Bible to alchemy to modern science, psychology, and even Aleister Crowley's religion of Thelema, specifically in regards to the harrowing spiritual dilemma of crossing the abyss. It is here that once a Thelemite crosses the abyss, they are conferred the name Nemo, which poetically means nobody. We might even say the entire point of Crowley's religion is about Finding Nemo. Even putting Crowley aside, we can see direct corollaries in other traditions which seek the same goal. In the psychedelic sphere, we have ego death, while in Buddhism, the concept of anatman, or no self, is even closer as a one-to-one relationship with Thelema's ideas about Nemo. And it's heterodox in precisely the same way. For instance, Christianity and Hinduism assert the existence of an essential self, where Thelema and Buddhism lean heavily in the other direction. Even in Scientology, the concept exists in the pursuit of going clear by ridding oneself of body thetans. I think it would be fair to say that Marlin is definitely a PTS on his way to becoming an SP, unless he goes in for some auditing very quickly. In short, Finding Nemo is about the ego relinquishing enough control and self-importance to be reborn, free from the all-consuming emotions of regret, fear, and attachment which formerly directed one's life.
Man, that's pretty heavy.
They could have just called the movie Going Clear.
Yeah, at first I thought this was a little bit of a stretch, but you guys have really convinced me.
We're just getting started.
I know. I can't wait to hear the rest of this.
So there's some, interesting things we brought up there. And in many philosophies across cultures, it's like everybody has something wrong with themselves. And like we all understand we're not perfect beings. And at the start of Finding Nemo, it's kind of like starts off really sad. And I feel like a part of the message of this movie is a little bit about disability, like how Marlin is incapable of saving coral and most of his eggs, how Nemo has a weak fin, all the other fish at Nemo's school got something going on with them, and Dory seems to be suffering from short-term memory loss.
The horse is H2O intolerant.
That doesn't even make sense.
I know.
And then like some of the other fish in the tank, they got psychological traits that are not really totally favorable in, I guess, quote unquote society. And we're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, if you suffer from short-term memory loss or you're disabled. It's just society looks down upon people. This movie's about overcoming that, and in fact, it might become a strength.
Well, and there's a lot that we can learn from it if we keep an open mind, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For example, Marlin is pretty closed-minded to the potential that his own child has.
He's also unsure of himself, though, too. Like, he has extremely low self-esteem, and he's not bold. He constantly boxes himself and throttles himself from doing things because he's afraid of bad things happening. He's traumatized.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a disability, I guess I would loosely say.
Even the sharks have issues. Like, even the biggest fish in the sea has issues.
Marlin's condition is pretty interesting because he finally understands at the end of the movie that he is passing his own issue to his son by stifling his son, and he's stifling himself. You know what I mean? I think it is a disability. And I'm saying, yeah, but everybody has issues. Everybody has stuff they have to wrestle with.
For whatever occult or esoteric content is in Finding Nemo, it can still be seen as psychologically driven by unconscious motives, drives, and desires, which mesh seamlessly with the spiritual and alchemical themes.
For me, the general theme of Finding Nemo is of the growth that results from a journey. It's a journey which starts with loss, facing challenges, and then the learning which happens along the way. Marlin's tragic loss of coral and their eggs happens at the opening of the film. The loss of coral leads Marlin to become coddling and overprotective of Nemo. And this is Marlin's coping mechanism for grief, where due to an inevitable loss, one tries desperately to avoid losses in the future by tightening protective measures. So I relate this to trying to desperately hold water in your hands by tightening your grasp, and it just spills out between your fingers.
According to the National Institutes of Health, coping is defined as the thoughts and behaviors mobilized to manage internal and external stressful situations.
So we start to get a cause and effect thing going on, because Nemo, frustrated with his overprotective father, desires to prove that he is independent and capable of doing things on his own. Marlin's coddling put distance between Nemo and Marlin in their relationship. Ultimately, it results in Nemo rejecting the restrictions and swimming out to touch the butt of the boat. And this in turn results in more loss, this time of his son Nemo. And that interpersonal distance between Marlin and Nemo has become actualized as physical distance and instigates the necessary journey of growth for both of them. And so the initiation begins.
But what is initiation? Is this just some fancy $10 word we're applying to a kid's movie to be pretentious intellectuals? I think not. The concept of initiation is one of the primary themes and sources of humor in the film. According to the Oxford Languages Dictionary, initiation is the action of admitting someone into a secret or obscure society or group
typically with a ritual.
Here, here.
All right. Okay. So in this example, like there's a few initiations in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And Nemo sneaks off with the bad kids, the kids that are trying to have the real fun. And they're all like, okay, like I'm going to go out first. I'm going to go farther. And then I'm going to go farther. All right, Nemo, your turn. That's part of an initiation. But Nemo's original disposition to it is like, no, I'm not going to join your little club. But once his dad shows up and starts being overly protective, he's like, all right, I get it now. I'm going to go touch the butt.
That's what you have to do when you join the Templars. You have to touch the butt.
And witches kiss the devil's butt as
They got to
well.
touch the butt. So initiation occurs in the film overtly at least twice. Both of the obvious ones seem to happen more or less against the will of the person being initiated. The first instance is when Dory and Marlin become forcefully inducted into the Fish Are Friends Not Food Club, which is hosted by the unlikely trio of 3 ferocious sharks, Bruce, Chum, and Anchor, who, according to the 5th step of their program, must bring a fish friend with them to the meeting. This is a not-so-subtle reference to Alcoholics Anonymous, which practices a 12-step program to help its members recover from alcoholism. The real Alcoholics Anonymous is controversial precisely because of its initiatory elements, which include the necessary resignation of one's will to a god or higher power. When it's Marlin's turn to speak during the Fisher Foods Not Friend meeting, he denies that he has a problem at all, which sees the congregation accuse him of denial and pushes him back on stage to speak. If we consider the title of the club, Fish Are Friends Not Food, the 3 F's can be read as the numerical value 6, making it 666.
That's because it's the 6th letter of the alphabet?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be English gematria. Simple English gematria.
So this ritual initiation of Marlin, it takes place in a rusty, derelict ship. And rust itself is highly symbolic of decay and negligence. Since his vocalization of his inability to acknowledge his faults takes place inside this vessel of long overlooked and neglected self-awareness, it seems a fitting visual representation and environment for his long overdue initiation. It's here in this dilapidated vessel, surrounded by equally rusty but still very live minds, that Marlin declares he has no problems, before proceeding to act out his problematic, controlling, and overprotective nature. He wrestles with Dory for control of the scuba goggles. It causes a chain reaction where Dory gets smacked with it, has a nosebleed, and the blood incites the temptation of the shark Bruce.
Oh, well, that's like clearly a blood ritual.
Oh, yeah. Then a whole chaotic chase scene ensues thereafter until Marlin and Dory escape the ship and hide in a torpedo hole. Obviously, you can't hide from your problems or the consequences of them forever, so the torpedo just inches forward with each bash of the shark's head against the opening. And Marlin says, I need to get that mask. And Dory's like, you want that mask? Okay. And then they both get launched out along with the torpedo directly into the shark's mouth where the mask is. And of course, the torpedo ends up exploding the mines. So to me, this is a clear representation of the sensitive and delicate nature of addressing one's own faults and a failure to do so resulting in an explosive reaction.
Or even addressing one's fault haphazardly against one's will.
Totally. Either way, the initiation has begun, whether Marlin makes it more difficult for himself or not. He tends to like to do things the hard way.
I also like when Bruce was attacking them through the hole and the other 2 sharks are trying to hold him back. And they're like, this isn't like him. He's just an addict. This isn't the real Bruce. So really, even though Marlin and Dory are being aggressed, as if the other person is in control and choosing to, they're actually not, because they're under control of the bloodlust. So really, it is kind of a chain reaction, and it is Marlin's fault.
And if you can explain that type of thing to a child using a cartoon, I think that's good on you. That says you understand this well enough to make it digestible that even a child could understand it. And that speaks well on its creator.
I think the underlying current on a child understanding this particular scene about the bloodlust is that, in fact, when sharks do smell blood, they do go crazy.
And just like if you have an alcohol problem, you can't have one drink. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, if a kid is messing with a cat, they'll know if the cat's growling, it can't help itself but scratch you, so don't keep messing with it. There's a lot of lessons a kid could take out of that without it necessarily even relating to adult themes. But even the adults, they get it. They understand where that's coming from. So it also gives them a little nugget of knowledge.
When we take biology into account in this way, it brings about the dark fan theories. One dark yet popular fan theory exists, which describes the entire film through the lens of Marlin's coping behaviors, which have spiraled out of control. One reason for its popularity is that it piggybacks off the intention of the creator and director Andrew Stanton, who, having felt Lion King missed the mark with realism, wanted to make an animation with the same emotional poignancy without needing to sacrifice the zoological accuracy.
Yeah, in an interview, he said something along the lines of, concerning The Lion King, that it was a, quote, romanticized view of the animal kingdom. And then in a few lines later, he says basically that Nemo is a movie in a dangerous reality like Bambi. Bambi's another sad kids film that's got a pretty good message to it, that things go on and you kind of got to let go. But we're not talking about Bambi today.
So with this in mind, fans have suggested some alternative interpretations of what happens in the opening sequence.
Yeah, this is an interesting point to consider. So what's this about clownfish biology that's so trippy?
As we are led to believe, both coral and all but one of their eggs are consumed by a ferocious barracuda. Problem is, barracuda do not eat clownfish eggs. On the other hand, sufficiently upset female clownfish do. This has left some to speculate that perhaps it was an unsatisfied coral who decided to consume her own eggs. It's only when Marlin realizes he is now totally alone that he imagines one egg is left behind, which he names Nemo, and of course we know that means nobody. In this theory, Nemo is merely Marlin's imaginary friend, which he envisions as a coping mechanism because he cannot deal with the reality that his wife Coral ate their kids. If we continue taking zoological accuracy into account, then we can also safely assume that Coral was not born female. This is because every clownfish begins their life as a male. Furthermore, each school of clownfish only ever has one female, who acts as the leader of the school and only ever mates with the dominant male. When the dominant female eventually dies, the dominant male begins the gradual, sometimes years-long transition to becoming the dominant female clownfish. I couldn't help but notice at one point Marlin says the phrase, dude crush, because crush is his dude crush.
He's going through some changes.
While these zoological details make a tantalizing fan theory, the symbolism they evoke is valuable for understanding the deeper themes of the film, whether the actual events occurred or not.
So if we put all this into consideration, Nemo is the only other male around Marlin after the intro. So by default and what nature says, Nemo's going to grow up and bang his own daddy mom?
What kind of a father do you think you are?
Come on.
Man, I reject this so hard as like a take it literally kind of thing.
I don't know. The creator said he was going for realism.
I mean, on the other hand, if you look at the symbolism from like how divine energies interact with each other, it's not too dissimilar from like the incest in Egyptian mythology, but they're not implying it really as a literal thing. It's these two things are born from the same thing, or this energy is born from that energy and makes union with that energy.
Well, it evokes the idea of the tarot, because you begin as the princess and you become wed to the prince, who's your holy guardian angel. And you gain a union with this prince until your consciousness is wed with it entirely. But then the next step, which is the part that this movie is concerned with, is when you take the step into becoming the queen, where then God becomes the king. And those two figures are higher up on the tree of life in a place beyond the personal ego. And because this story is in the tarot, it might just be coded that way to be like, hey, we got some tarot stuff going on. Because, I mean, they're clownfish. The tarot begins with the fool. And also, that part of the journey where you cross the abyss is when you meet Choronzon, the dweller of the abyss, who in this metaphor would be the barracuda, who, when approached, embodies all of one's negative personality traits that have not been dealt with and threaten to consume the initiate. This becomes the theme of the entire film for Marlin, which leads us to think, is this an alchemical interaction going on in one person? Or are we seeing multiple characters at play? Or is it both?
I've entertained two different perspectives regarding cause and effect with the movie. The first being each individual character as their own autonomous being and the interactions that they have with each other, including their projections on others. And the second perspective being each character representing aspects of oneself and how those aspects interact and impose on each other.
So we can watch the movie as if it's a single person and all of the characters are a part of them, or we could also see them as their own individual people.
Yes. And from either of these perspectives, we're still able to gain insight into a cause and effect relationship with formulas for reaching a harmonious conclusion that results in rebirth. So I feel it's worthwhile to consider both perspectives in these characters and their relationships before diving further into those relationships.
Oh, we're taking a dive. I get it.
I think that's very valid because, I mean, you can analyze the different characters' relationships with one another, but when you do look at it, say as like an internal struggle between different aspects of one person, it makes a lot more sense to me, at least.
It's also the more difficult one to explain. So that's the one that personally I wanted to focus a little more on. But we get a glimpse into Marlin and Coral's relationship before that tragic barracuda thing occurs. If we stop to humanize these characters, we can see that Marlin is insecure and continuously searches for praise and approval from Coral. Coral appears somewhat blasé and dismissive of Marlin. However, Marlin is equally dismissive of her when she says that she wants to name the eggs. The act of naming, as we recently mentioned throughout our recent names episode, is in and of itself a sacred thing with spiritual significance. So Marlin quite blatantly dismisses Coral's desire to acknowledge the sacred nature and power of names for each life by saying they'll just name half Marlin Jr. and the other half Coral Jr. He also suggests his name before hers, showing that he puts himself before her, and then just follows it up with, okay, we're done, and swims away. And she says, I like Nemo, meaning I like nobody, which on the surface can appear quite harsh for a statement, but it may also be an expression of a fondness and desire to acknowledge the universal aspect of the soul outside of the egoistic personality or identity. So if Marlin is the ego and Coral represents that desire for contentment and union with the universal all, then they are inherently at odds with each other.
This is depicted symbolically in the Lover's card of the Rider-Waite Tarot, where the male, or Adam, is seen looking to Eve, while Eve is looking toward the angel above them. As subtle as this first may seem, it is there to symbolize that the divine feminine is the part of us that is closer to God, or in biblical terms, the Word. If we translate this into the language of Jungian psychology, we would say that Eve, or in this case Coral, is the subconscious mind which is connected like roots to the collective unconscious, leaving Adam, or Marlin, who represents the ego, to look over to his lover to receive that flow of creative inspiration from them. As the argument goes, when this creative inspiration is felt, humans tend to express it as the Word, which advanced human evolution from slow-moving biology to the rapid pace of human culture. These ideas were expressed to some extent in our last episode by Terence McKenna, who, assuming the most successful women were the ones who mastered language the best, it was women who ultimately led the first domestication of plants, agriculture, and eventually the city-state. This would also explain why Coral wishes to do the naming of the eggs and Marlin could care less. This is interesting because it reflects a scientific and occult perspective of Eden as opposed to a traditional biblical one, which sees Adam naming all the animals in the garden before ever meeting Eve. Garden of Eden motif continues with the appearance of the serpent, which in Finding Nemo is that barracuda who brings death, a casting out, and of course, the fall of Marlin.
So it's almost like the coral reef is the garden.
Yeah, everything's perfect at first, everything's great, and then the serpent comes and it's like, uh-oh.
It's also really easy to get wrapped up in the gender debate with this, but if you think of it as Marlin being the ego, that means that everyone has that. Every person has that. It's not specific to men, just as the Hadith part of your soul in Thelema is not specific to men. Every man and every woman is a star.
Yes, these formulas apply to whatever your sexual identity may be.
Right. So Marlin teaches Nemo that the ocean isn't safe. And if we think of the ocean as being symbolic of the divine feminine, it translates as there are scary aspects of the divine feminine or the abject feminine. This for me brings the Egyptian concept of the chaotic waters of Nun to mind, or even how the fierce goddess Sekhmet is described. She's terrifying, but she's also a protective, motherly, and solar aspect of the divine feminine. That being said, the divine feminine also swallows all, just as everything can return to the waters of Nun, and what we see after the attack is not solar in nature. When Marlin is waking up, we see the reflection of the moon in the water instead. Since the sun is related to consciousness itself and the moon to the subconscious, it is Marlin's rejection of what is decidedly abject to him whim that prompts the subconscious and the rejected feminine into action.
This quality of the divine feminine is the engine which drives this part of the initiation forward. The initiate is said to sacrifice the ego, or named parts of the self, in order to be reborn as Nemo, or nobody, which represents the unbound and limitless aspect of the self. In Thelema, this is represented by the pouring of all of one's blood into the grail of the divine feminine Babylon. It is within this tradition that Nemo is named specifically as a result of this act. This is represented in the film by Coral consuming all of the eggs, Marlin Jr. and Coral Jr., leaving only Nemo to be born. If we consider the Edenic symbolism of the opening sequence, we might see the clownfish's red egg as the fruit in the garden, with Coral having eaten all of the fruit save for the one in the center, which is offered to Marlin.
The word of sin is restriction, O man. Refuse not thy wife, if she will. O lover, if thou wilt, depart. There is no bond that can unite the divided but love. All else is accursed. Accursed be it to the aeons. Hell.
Heckel was quick to realize this verse from chapter 1 in Thelema's Book of the Law is related to both the Terence McKenna idea of Eden and how it relates to Coral's symbolic representation of Eve. If thy wife represents our inspiration, we ought to neither refuse or force her, which Marlin is guilty of on both counts. Likewise, Marlin's authoritative claims to either Nemo or Coral do not rightly extend beyond a bond of mutual love.
So what you're saying here is she wants to name the eggs. Marlin doesn't listen. He kind of oversteps his role, and she immediately is like, okay, well, I'm going to go outside. And then that's when the barracuda pops up and Mama gobbles up.
Catch me outside. How about that?
Yeah, and it's like almost like she's ready to go and just eat the eggs and leave one so that her way is, she gets her way by having one egg, and it's going to be named Nemo because that's her one. I don't know. But it's almost like she summons a dragon or a snake of some sort from the abyss to come and like enact her order of what she thinks is right because her partner just like crossed the line. And yeah, so that's what you're saying here is that the energies were crossed in a bad way. So it like kind of rebounds in the movie it shows you, a brutal aftermath.
It's just the nature of crossing the abyss. If you don't offer up all of the personality and its problematic parts and its neediness, the demon Corazon will consume you and everything you loved anyway.
Since all clownfish are born male, meaning that Coral had transitioned to become the dominant female, we can also relate this alchemically back to the white eagle and the red lion of the Lover's card in the Thoth Tarot. The feminine white eagle is said to devour the masculine red lion in order for the union of opposites to take place. In this sense, the active principles of the feminine ocean consumes all, leaving Marlin with only Nemo. The blood of the lion feeds the eagle, and the blood of the lion and the gluten of the eagle are poured into the transformative vessel. So Marlin is put in a position where he must go through a purification process, like an alchemical process of breaking down the structures of the ego. The lion goes through a purification process which requires a harmonizing of masculine control with a mercurial feminine solvent. This is part of Marlin's transformation journey. In Marlin's loss of connection to the divine feminine, he's put into a position where he must become the divine feminine himself. This receptivity is the conversion of the red lion into the white, while simultaneously activating the feminine white eagle through the red eagle. Because he previously had union with the divine feminine, the Nemo was born. It's the inherent truth which cannot be destroyed, only lost or neglected. In order to be reunited with Nemo, Marlin must initiate the process of becoming the divine feminine himself.
Which, according to the realism, is what Marlin is actually doing.
In this, we can see how the Lover's card can also represent the necessary marriage of masculine and feminine energies within ourselves.
Right, because this is a biological change that would start to happen immediately as his wife, Clownfish, was killed. His brain will start switching to mom mode, and over a couple years, will have the organs to bear a child.
Likewise, when an initiate crosses the abyss, they are said to become impregnated by Pan.
Woo!
So all initiates who cross the abyss, well,
You gonna touch the butt?
you become a mom. You become the queen.
It's like philosophical meditation drag show at the top levels of this shit, I guess.
Marlin needs to know, don't be a drag, just be a queen.
Yeah, sounds funny when you put it that way. But hey, they're fucking clownfish.
This brings us to my favorite part of the episode, the name etymology. Well, coral might seem like a no-brainer to name a coral reef-dwelling fish, the etymology of coral gives us some good clues. The word coral is said to originate in the Greek korellion, which means hard skeleton. This is a perfect name for the coral reef because the reef itself is composed of the skeletal remains of coral polyps, which are soft-bodied organisms related to anemone and jellyfish. If we consider the thelemic angle of Finding Nemo, this makes a spooky amount of sense. On the Qabbalistic tree of life, hard skeleton invokes the mysteries of Bina, which means understanding, and is associated with the generation and reabsorption of form which constitutes the material world. For this reason, Bina is often referred to as the Great Sea, and conceptualized as the womb of the divine feminine Babylon, which births and consumes all material forms. As Papyri and Helena say in their text, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism,
Babylon, as the Great Mother, represents matter, a word which is derived from the Latin word for mother. She is the physical mother of each of us, the one who provided us with the material flesh to clothe our naked spirits. She is the archetypal mother, the great yoni, the womb of all that lives, through the flowing of blood. She is the great sea, the divine blood itself which cloaks the world and which courses through our veins. And she is Mother Earth, the womb of all life that we know.
While we're looking at the Kabbalistic tree of life, hard skeleton could possibly also refer to the death card, which usually depicts a hard skeleton. The Hebrew letter association with this card is nun, which means fish. If we consider that nun also refers to the primordial waters of Nun, we see a hard overlap with the symbolism of Bina and the Great Sea. This word, korellion, probably has some Semitic roots related to the Hebrew gorel, which means pebble, and the Arabic jarl, which means small pebble. This possibly refers to the stone of the philosophers, the goal of the alchemists, which further may be symbolized by the lone red egg of Nemo. Some people even think clowns have red noses for this reason, that it represents the philosopher's stone. And for good reason! They take the misery of life and turn it into laughter. They are alchemists themselves.
That makes sense to me.
It is also thought that coral has etymological roots to the Greek Kuroholos, which means human form, and possibly a reference to the mermaids in the film. Those might be the divers who take Nemo, but also later, in the end of the film, when Dory and Marlin arrive in Sydney, they share some dialogue with a pelican in front of a ship dubbed the Surly Mermaid. With these two ideas, seeming only loosely connected, they do match up with numbers generated from turning Finding Nemo into a numerical code using simple English gematria of A equals 1 and Z equals 26. Using this method, Finding Nemo has a numerical value of 110, which is shared by the Greek god Protheus, who Homer referred to as the Old Man of the Sea. This Old Man of the Sea is the quintessential image of the Surly Mermaid, in fact. Etymologically, the proto in his name means first, and as such was considered the first son of Poseidon. He was capable of offering accurate prophecy, but only on the condition that he first be caught, which was problematic because Protheus is capable of changing forms at will. As such, Protheus is where we get the adjective Prothean, which means versatile, mutable, or capable of many forms. Well, we already discussed that Marlin might be transitioning gender and that clownfish are certainly Prothean in this regard. The name clownfish itself may be a reference to the Fool card of the tarot, which traverses the entire deck, embodying each card until finally arriving at the oneness in the universe. Interestingly, the tarot is also used for prophecy, just like Protheus.
And it's cool also, his name is Marlin, which is usually a fish that's sought after. You know those old fisherman tales where there's this one fish that's too tough and big to catch?
Yeah.
Keeps getting away. That gives me Old Man of the Sea vibes. Like, it could be the same spirit that's transforming into different animals.
Isn't that the fish that's in The Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway? Isn't it a marlin?
Is it?
Oh, it might be. And so the Old Man in the Sea, because he's constantly changing, it represents how life is constantly changing, especially when you're on the sea. You just have to improvise. You just have to keep swimming, essentially.
Yes, it was a marlin.
Oh, man.
That's crazy.
See, they're just flexing on us. See, and none of these symbols, like, transgress against the meaning of the film or the spirit of the film. And that's why I think quite a bit of this is probably intentional.
Yeah, we might be like reaching here. This might sound like crazy shit, but from my point of view, it's making a lot of sense.
This is kind of blowing my mind.
Dude.
So how Prothean is primordial? Clowns represent the primordial in multiple cultures, including the Pueblo Indians, who adorn their sacred clowns or heyoka with stripes.
Oh,
Then, the Hebrew letter associated with the fool is Aleph, which has a numerical value of 1, but when spelled out is 111, a single digit away from 110. Is Nemo the missing one?
111 as in 3 stripes.
Also, Marlin has exactly that many stripes. Lastly, 110 is the numerical value of the Hebrew word nin, which means sun, but in ancient Semitic also means fish.
This is awesome.
In nature, Marlin is usually referring to, as Mari brought up, a swordfish, which has a mimetic link to both the lovers and death cards of the tarot, whose letter association for each, respectively, are Zain for sword and Nun for fish. While one symbolizes a harmonious union and division, the other symbolizes death and rebirth, the primary themes of the film. From a Welsh origin, Marlin derives from Myrden, which means sea fortress or hill near the sea. In German language, Marlin has a similar meaning as a conjunction of Maru for famous and Land for land. Both of these titles are a reference to the opening of the 3rd chapter of the Book of the Law, which, when taken out of context, is provocative and confusing, but when interpreted correctly is precisely the method which Marlin needs to accomplish his initiation. Beginning with the 4th line of chapter 3, the Book of the Law reads,
Choose ye an island, fortify it, dung it about with enginery of war. I will give you a war engine. With it ye shall smite the people, and none shall stand before you.
Well, this seems like advice Darth Vader may have given to his engineering team. Its actual meaning is proclaiming a method of fortifying one's consciousness against the multitude of inner voices we normally identify with. This corresponds well to Marlin's initiation into the 666 Club, which occurs inside a literal engine of war surrounded by deadly fortifications. If it seems like Marlin's name being connected to the Book of the Law is a stretch, we must consider that the Romanian origin, Marlin, is said to originate with Marcus and means dedicated to Mars. If we take both meanings together, fortress and Mars, we arrive at Cairo, Egypt, whose official name is Al-Kahira, which means literally place or camp of Mars, in reference to the fact that the planet was rising at the time of the city's foundation. Famously, it was here in Cairo that Aleister Crowley and Rose Edith Kelly channeled Thalima's sacred Book of the Law. Further still, the 3rd chapter we just quoted is said to be delivered by an aspect of the Egyptian god Ra, who is symbolized by a hawk, which is said to be the meaning behind the American edition of the name Marlin.
Right. Marlin also means falcon, right?
Yes.
I thought it was interesting, too, how in the intro, Marlin is asking Coral, do you remember how we first met? And then it's like a pickup line or something he's saying to her, like, oh, do I have a hook in my mouth? And it's interesting if you think about the Lima and the Thoth tarot, is that the Star and the Emperor are switched. So it's debatable on which card this might be to some people, but Hook is the Star card, Sadi, or the Emperor card. Either of the two kind of work, but it's also a very Martian style of that archetype.
Oh yeah, like he's the Emperor.
Right. But he's also the star of the movie. He's a star in the movie. So it's kind of like either way, it kind of works. If you're looking at this movie in a Thelemic perspective, that whole Sadi is not the star thing is like, okay, well, what is this all about? It's a whole lesson in itself. So they're kind of telling you that at the beginning, like this whole interaction involves this hook joke to get these two alchemical spouses together. And he's using a hook to do it. It's like, okay, well, lesson 1 in Thelema tarot is, Sadi is not the star. So
Marlin's not the star. He's also the red eagle, which is going through this transformation, which is what we see on the Emperor card as well.
So yeah, it's all starting off on this whole idea of, well, look at this interaction here. Crowley's changing it, on purpose because it says so to do it in the Book of the Law also. So we end up back at this war god in the movie being the star of the show a little bit.
And if you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, where we talk about Dory, Tauret, talk about Gil, the Babe of the Abyss, the Demiurge, Alchemy, Pelicans, and the Greek magical Papyri, and all of what it has to do with Finding Nemo, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 gets you not only the second half of this episode, but our entire library of extended episodes. I'll send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art and the secret keys to our Discord server, where you can talk to us about
touching the butt.
Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.